On today's show, the Hawks get a win at home over the Hornets. To be fair, it was not the prettiest win in the world, but in the end, a win is a win is a win in the NBA. We'll get into all of what transpired and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 2110 of the Locked On Hawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Sunday evening into Monday. And today's podcast starts with folks at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. And today, we'll be diving into what became a 113-110 victory for the Hawks at home over the Hornets. Broadly speaking, a win is a win in the NBA. One of the tenets of this podcast is that you cannot assume anything in the NBA, and I think people generally take for granted these are all professionals, and even the easiest quote-unquote games are not all that easy. You still have to win and show up, but this game was pretty ugly for the Hawks in some respects. I say all that. They still won it. It was about as ugly of a win as you can get given the circumstance, but you win it. And occasionally you have to win ugly in the NBA, especially to get to where the Hawks want to go this year. And they did that in this game. It's their seventh win in the last 9 games, which is obviously a positive. They're now 11-7 on the still young season. And their second win in about a 24-hour period. So I should at least plug this at the top. If you missed anything from the game on Saturday night in New Orleans, I did a full breakdown of that game, even on a weekend episode. So please check that one out and tell your friends as well. But the Hawks closed in this game as 8.5-point favorites, according to our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. And if you are new to the show, what we do here, I like to give that number to give you a projection. Basically, it's been proven over and over again that the point spread is the most accurate, publicly available projection that we can access. Is it always right? No, but it's a good projection of what to expect coming into a game. And the Hawks were comfortable favorites. In fact, this is the second time they've been favored by this much or more in a game this year. And the first time was literally yesterday in New Orleans. So it was obviously a spot where the Hawks were expected to win. It was a back-to-back on both sides. Keep that in mind. Add some variance there. Charlotte played yesterday as well, but they're shorthanded in a big way. I won't go through all of the names, but no LaMelo Ball, no Brandon Miller, Grant Williams, etc. on the Charlotte side. The Hawks were also shorthanded in this game as well, to be fair. No Porzingis, no Trae Young, of course, is still out, and no Luke Kennard. So it was kind of ugly from that standpoint. But this game was full of runs on both sides. But I say that it was still close basically the entire game. There was exactly one lead of 10 points or more in the entire game on either side. And it was the Hawks being up by 10 with like 7 minutes to go, and it lasted like one possession. Everything else was close. It was back and forth, but it was up and down, up and down, up and down until the Hawks finally escaped where they win after nearly blowing this game. I have to say that. We'll come back to it later on, but the Hawks were up by 10 with 7 minutes to go at home against a team that they're better than, and they almost gave it away to the point where they were down 3, and it could have been 5 or 6 if a call did not go their way on a Colin Sexton drive offensive foul that was called. And that's called a defensive foul. It's an and 1, and you're down by 6, and you're probably in trouble. So close margins is always in the NBA, but the Hawks did enough to win, and that is the single biggest takeaway from this game is that previous Hawks teams might have lost this one, to be honest with you, but they were able to emerge victorious along the way. And to get into a little bit more of the broad strokes, the Hawks ended up scoring efficiently in this game on the whole, even if it was, I would say, wildly inconsistent at times. The highs were high, the lows were low, and in the end result was still pretty good offensively. They scored 1.19 points per trip, so a 119 offensive rating. That's actually quite good on the whole. Even when you adjust for Charlotte, who I think was 25th in the league in defense coming into the night, this is a pretty bad defensive team. That's part of the calculus here in evaluating this game. The Hawks did enough offensively to feel pretty decently on the whole. They ended up with 4 guys that scored at least 20 points in this game, and those 4 players, Jalen Johnson, Dyson Daniels, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and Nickeil Alexander-Walker, scored 93 of the 113 points for the Hawks. If you want to throw in Keaton Wallace, who had 10 points off the bench, 5 guys scored 103 points for the Hawks. And everybody else scored a total of 10. But it was enough to kind of emerge victorious, even with a pretty crazy ratio. Interestingly enough, this game kind of ebbed and flowed by the Hawks' 2-point shooting in some respects. Ended up with a very solid 57% inside the arc in this game. That's a pretty normal number. In the first half, it was 45%, which is quite bad. In the second half, it was 69%, which is utterly elite. So you can kind of see the dichotomy there. The Hawks were making shots around the rim in the second half and that they were missing early on. And there were other areas that kind of gave way to that, but that was a pretty good indicator of how things were going offensively at times. The Hawks only took 31 threes. Not terribly shocking because they didn't have a lot of their creators or play finishers. So obviously Trae Young being out generally leads to less threes, at least on the whole over his career. But beyond that, two of their better shooters, Porzingis and Kennard, were unavailable in this game, which led to less three-point shooting on the whole. The Hawks were fine there, 11 or 31, which is 35%. That's fine. But it wasn't a huge part of the game on the whole. The Hornets did take 13 more than the Hawks. That's generally a bad recipe in the modern NBA, but they overcame it because of the two-point shooting and one key area, which was ball security. So if you follow the show like the last 2 weeks before yesterday, basically, the Hawks had some pretty disastrous ball security games. What I mean by turning the ball over just way too many times. But for the second game in a row, it was pretty good here. They had 9 turnovers in the entire game. Only 4 of them were of the live ball variety. And as we'll talk about more later on, Jalen Johnson, their number one option right now, had 0 in this game. Nobody had more than 2 for the Hawks. That's a very, very good thing for the offense. And that definitely allowed the Hawks to, despite having some rebounding issues, they were able to hold their own and basically be about net neutral in the possession game. And when you are net neutral, your shooting kind of take over, and the Hawks were able to ride that to the close fought victory. And the ball moved well. The ball moved well. On top of that, they had 32 assists. The Hawks have been playing pretty egalitarian and pretty positively there. So while it was only 4 guys scoring all the points, the ball was moving and they were taking pretty good looks on the whole in this game. So process-wise, it was pretty solid for a lot of the night. Not all the night, but certainly a lot of the night on offense. Now, the disappointing side of the floor for me was defense. Now, it wasn't a disaster by any means. Like, for example, it was still much better than the San Antonio game on Thursday where the Hawks like basically fell apart defensively, in my opinion. But they had a 116 defensive rating. That actually came down at the end after the Hawks held the Hornets scoreless in the last 3 minutes of this game. Now, to be clear, that's a very big stretch, and that it all matters, so that should be factored in. But until then, the first 45 minutes or so, defensively, it was not particularly good from the Hawks. They should not be allowing that kind of offensive efficiency to a Charlotte team on the road on a back-to-back without LaMelo Ball and Brandon Miller. That should not be happening. Yes, Con Kneppel is a guy that I love. He's already good. Sexton's a good player. Like, they had some guys available, but the Hawks should not have given up this many points per possession to this Hornets team, given their personnel available, in my view. On the positive side, the Hawks allowed quite literally 0 fast break points in this game. Obviously, a season high franchise record in some respects. Charlotte does not run, to be fair. They're 28th in the NBA in fast break points, and I would say even less of that without LaMelo Ball. They don't really have an engine to push the pace. But still, even when you factor that in, giving up 0 fast break points in a whole game is pretty remarkable. A lot of that, though, goes back to what I said about the offense. Not turning the ball over, only 4 live ball giveaways in the entire game. That really allows you to get back. So while the Hawks have had some pretty bad moments in getting back defensively this year, particularly that opener against Toronto, this is a high watermark for that. They give up nothing in the fast break game in this game for the Hornets. On the negative side, and probably the single biggest issue in this game, this is going to be very familiar if you followed the Hawks this year, was the defensive rebounding. So this is not new, and it's basically been, across lineups. It's been across player availability, all of that. The Hawks are a bottom 5 team in the league in defensive rebound rate this year, and they are the only good team in that tier. Maybe you could say Miami is kind of similar in that tier as well. They're playing a very different style than the Hawks are, but the Hawks have been leaking points on the defensive glass all year long, and that happened again in this game. Porzingis being out, you might think that's a negative. It's not really, because he's not a good rebounder, even though he's so tall. But even with him out in this game, they had all kinds of trouble. And I have to say this out loud: Moussa Diabate is a young guy, second-round pick out of Michigan, a guy I followed at the college level. He was a terror on the offensive glass this game. So part of that's that he's really good at that. But still, the Hawks had another very bad rebounding game. They had a 64% defensive rebound rate in this game. What does that mean? Well, league average is like in the 70% range. That doesn't sound terrible, but it is. Like, for instance, that'd be league worst over the full season so far, what the Hawks were doing tonight. The first half was actually pretty good. I sat next to Kevin Chouinard at Hawks games often, and Kevin and I were talking about this at halftime, how the Hawks actually had a pretty good defensive rebounding half. But after that, they got worked after halftime. For example, they allowed 20 second chance points in the second half. That is a like really, really bad number for a full game, much less a half. So that's a disaster. They only got 52% of available defensive rebounds in the second half. That is a horrific number, and it almost cost them. A lot of the pushback that the Hornets did in the second half was because the Hawks they would actually play well defensively and then be unable to close possession on the glass. Now, is that going to be, permanent? No, but we've seen enough now, almost quarter of the season, where the Hawks have been a bad defensive rebounding team. And Quinn always talks about gang rebounding. There's only one guy in the rotation that I would say is a clearly good rebounder, and that's Jalen Johnson. I would also say Dyson Daniels when compared to guards is very good. But as far as the front court's concerned, it's basically only Jalen. Okongwu is totally fine. Like, he's not a problem there. Mo Gay is not a problem there. But they have the one, like, clearly plus rebounder. And some of the other guys, like Pete Krejci's not a good rebounder. Rishi is below average there as well. Nickeil isn't great either, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Long story short, that's a problem they're going to have to fix. Obviously, it's easier and more helpful to fix a problem like that when you win the game. They all know the stakes here. By the way, it's not – I always see this. It's not that they're not hustling. It's not an effort issue. The Hawks are playing hard, but they are not executing. They're not boxing out well enough, and also just don't have the greatest personnel in the world. So it's a weakness that's probably going to stay a weakness, I would guess, but it should be better than this, and it almost cost them in this game. But in the end, again, it didn't. I never want to dismiss a game as an easy win. Like, there are obviously degrees. This game is a more favorable spot than a lot of other games are. I thought the Hawks, for example, had a very bad spot on Thursday in San Antonio. It didn't excuse that loss, but it was a bad spot for them. Last night in New Orleans, I mentioned it was actually a terrible spot for the Pelicans. Tonight, it was pretty neutral, back-to-back, all that stuff. But the Hawks just did not play that well, but they still got the win. So I'm not a fan of just like thumbs up, thumbs down. I'm not going to do that for you. When they win, it doesn't mean that everything went right. When they lose, it doesn't mean that everything went wrong. But today, it was a combination of, they had kind of a bad game and they still won. And that's actually kind of a mark of a good team on the whole. So take that away if you want to. But in the end, a victory. And we'll get into much more of how this game unfolded, more analysis, more player evaluations, and more in just one moment. Nobody knows your money goals better than you. Robinhood puts you in control of your money with tools that work as hard as you do, locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again, channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money, trade stocks and ETFs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood Strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. Expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, my mood, even my skin. And that's why I've been using DripDrop. It's the doctor. It developed hydration that actually keeps me running at full power, no matter what my day might look like. DripDrop is actually not your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula that's trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. I like using DripDrop as part of my daily routine. I mix it in a pack in the morning if I want to before work, or during that midday slump that I might have, as we all probably have at some point during the day. It tastes amazing as well. My flavor right now that I go to is watermelon, and it's become a secret weapon for me for staying sharp, energized through these long days and podcasts, etc. Hydration has become a non-negotiable thing for me, and DripDrop always helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly just better overall. And right now, DripDrop is actually offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to DripDrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONNBA when you get there. That's DripDrop.com, promo code LOCKEDONNBA, 20% off your first order. Stock up now before the heat hits hard. Keep your body and mind performing at their best with DripDrop. All right, we'll dive into the game in a second. Before we get to that, though, I want to encourage you to make Locked On Hawks your first listen each and every day. Check out the show. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. And be sure to tell your friends. I appreciate you being here as always. We'll get into the game now. And after the Hawks scored, the Hornets scored the first 4 points of this game. The Hawks had the first big run. It was a 12-2 run by the Hawks early in this game. They actually made 5 of their first 6 shots. 3 from Ricochet, 3 from Jalen. I thought Zach was really good activity-wise early on in this one. And then in the theme of most of the night, it was a back-and-forth game, and that manifested in a lot of runs. So Charlotte went on a 16-2 run. The Hawks missed 9 out of 10 shots after their strong start. They couldn't finish at the rim at all. They scored 2 points in the first 5 minutes, like a lot of missed floaters, missed 6-footers, that kind of thing. Also had some issues with Charlotte's switching defense. they were playing 1 through 5 switching, and the Hawks had some problems like creating against that. Both, like, for example, Mo Gay and Riche both had rough moments where they actually probably should have taken threes, passed on them, and that led to some bad shots and some process failures at the end of those possessions. But just kind of clunky overall early in this game. The Hawks, though, did have their own run right back, a 14-0 run, basically a crazy back and forth the entire first quarter, rotationally. So, again, Okongwu came back in this game. Porzingis sat on the back-to-back. People keep being surprised by this. At some point, people are going to understand that Porzingis is going to sit on back-to-backs. Like, that's just what I project to happen at this point in time. But I mentioned this last night on the show. I suspected, and I still do, they were a little bit extra careful with Okongwu last night, knowing that Porzingis was probably not going to play today, and Okongwu would be needed for big minutes tonight. So they gave him the night off last night. Obviously, it was a real injury. It was not rest, but just a little bit maybe of a due diligence to give him one more extra day. He came back tonight, played well. It was Mo Gay and Krejci as the first subs. Kennard missed this game, by the way, with left hip inflammation. His first absence for the Hawks. Keaton Wallace returned after a personal absence yesterday, and I thought he played pretty well, actually, in this game. A pretty weird quarter on the whole, but the Hawks were up by 3 points despite not shooting well from the inside of the arc early on in the game. The second quarter was more of the same. The Hornets opened on a run back in place of the Hawks. There were some lineup concerns that I'll point out throughout this podcast. One of them was they played this lineup early in the first half that had Keaton Wallace and Mo Gay together at the 4 with Mo Gay, by the way. And that did not last long. It didn't work offensively. They actually went to Asa Newell for his one stint in this game right after that, I think, for some extra offense. They actually played Asa with Okongwu for a second, and actually it was his first ever stint as the primary center, at least in non-garbage time. It didn't go like badly; it was fine, but Asa at least did that, and was basically a net neutral in his minutes, but was notable on the night without Porzingis. Dyson Daniels was a theme throughout this game because the Hornets played what is becoming a more popular coverage against the Hawks. They had their center on Dyson quite a bit, and early on. Dyson made his first 3 in like 2 weeks. Obviously, he's not taking them. I've been saying this for a long time now. So in an effort to not do the same exact segment again, I've done a lot of episodes recently. Dyson needs to shoot more from 3-point range. He took 4 in this game. That's encouraging. Maybe one of them. But I thought Dyson has done and really, really, really did in this game a good job navigating the space in other ways, like as a screener, for example. As a penetrator, as a guy who was shooting well on his floater in this game, creating off the dribble. Like, obviously, the shooting is going to be a concern in certain matchups, but he did a very, very good job combating that. Ended up with 22, 9, and 6 in this game and played well, turned into a positive, and actually was a game best for the Hawks, +5 in his full-time minutes. So that was at least a theme to follow throughout the game. Another minutes thing that I want to point out probably later on more was that Krejci played 19 minutes in the first half. And 32 in the game. I don't really get that, but I'll come back to that later on. V took only 1 shot in the entire game, which is wild given how much he played. But the Hawks were down by 2 points at halftime. Like they were never in control of this game until very briefly in the fourth. They didn't score well in the first half. They finished poorly around the rim, as I said before. Other than Jalen and Okongwu, everybody else was kind of cold in the first half. Defensively, they had their worst quarter in the third, but they also had their best offensive quarter in the third, which is kind of funny. They allowed 17 points in the first 4 minutes of the third quarter to go down by 7 points, their largest deficit to that point. They finally got some stops, and hey, shockingly, it turned into a run for the Hawks. The Hawks had a heck of a time trying to box out Diabate. Like, he had 3 rebounds on the offensive glass in like a 4-minute span, plus another loose ball foul. Like, he was a demon against them in that stretch. It was basically they were down by like 2 to 4 points for most of the third quarter. Then they had a nice stretch at the end of the third quarter. Keaton Wallace had a nice steal and a dunk on a fast break. And then in the final minute, Mo had a big block, a big dunk, and then Nickeil had a 3 on the last trip, and the Hawks were up by 4 again. I was like, hey, they're actually ending on a high note in that quarter. They scored 39 points in the third, and they shot 75% in the paint. They hit 12 shots in the paint in a single quarter. That was very, very encouraging. And overall, it was a 16-4 run by the Hawks to go up by 9 or 10 points in the middle of the fourth quarter. They're up by 10 points. It was like, hey, this game, it wasn't over by any means, but certainly like the Hawks were now, for the only time in the whole game, like seemingly in control, but they were not in control. They had a pretty gross 2-minute stretch where they had defensive problems. They got a technical foul on a defensive 3-second call. They missed 2 shots, and it was back to a 3-point game in a hurry, and it was never comfortable again. So rotationally, a couple questions and kind of comments I have here. Okongwu was on the bench briefly for the hiccup that happened there with that like kind of 9-2 run by the Hornets. That one appeared to clearly be because Okongwu was kind of gassed and he probably needed a breather. Totally fine to me that happened. That's very logical. The other one, though, was less defensible to me because Vit Krejci came in and closed ahead of Ricochet, and I just didn't get that one at all. So part of this is that I think Zach, just generally speaking, is a better defender than Vit by a pretty significant margin. In this game, the gap was even bigger, I think. Zach was a good defender. Vit was a shaky defender throughout this game. And look, Vit's been unconscious recently. I'm not downplaying that. He shot 60% from 3 over like a 6-game sample. Like that's obviously a big part of this. And to be fair to Vit, the Hornets were guarding Vit like he was a shooter, and that helps everybody else. So I'm not downplaying that. But he was not hot in this game. He took 1 shot, and defensively they were picking on him. So it was a bit of an interesting decision. I'll say that. We'll come back to that in a second. After a timeout with the Hawks up by 3, Okongwu, who was good in this game, smokes a layup, like Capella style, smokes a layup at a bad time. And then they give him a dunk, and it was a 1-point game again. Then Dyson scored actually like a pretty big shot to put the lead back to 3. But then things swung against them, and a lot of that was one interesting officiating decision. So Charlotte gets called for a foul, and the Hornets challenge it. It was Vit Krejci. It was like this weird pick and roll issue where there's a collision. It looked like to me and others that Vit got pushed into the collision, and they called the foul. I was shocked that they overturned it. If they had called it live that way, I'd have been like, all right, whatever. But the fact that they called it one way and then overturned it to a foul on Vit was literally shocking to me. I couldn't believe it. That was also a big swing, which I did say in real time in social media. I was like, hey, it feels like a big swing. And it was. The Hornets scored 6 points on their next 2 trips, including a 4-point play by Kneppel to take the lead. It was a 17-4 run overall by Charlotte to go from Hawks up by 10 to down by 3 within like 4 minutes. They scored 4 points in 4.5 minutes, did the Hawks offensively. So it was a perfect storm of disaster, basically. And look, they tried to give this game away in that stretch. They didn't do it in the end, but they tried. From there, Jalen hit a kind of star shot, honestly. It was kind of a bad shot, but as a star kind of shot to bail them out of a bad possession. Ended up being a huge shot. They cut it to 1. Nickeil gets a deflection, forces a turnover. Then Nickeil drives and scores in on-brand fashion for him this season. And they're up by 1 again. Jalen then really, I thought, got fouled with under a minute to go. It was uncalled, up by 1. If that gets called there, they're probably in decent shape. Then they had a good defensive possession. Vit gets the defensive rebound. Quinn tries to call timeout. Like, he is so far past the half-court line that it's supposed to be an automatic technical foul. Like, I confirmed this with multiple people after the game. If the refs actually did their job there, he'd probably give Quinn a technical. But also, Quinn was calling timeout, and he probably should have given the timeout as well. So, a weird spot. In the end, it didn't bite them. Vit then gets a scramble off the jump ball. Okongwu gets the ball, and the Hawks save the possession. So that was one huge swing. One thing I think I mentioned it once earlier, there was a possession late in this game where I think it was like 3 minutes to go, where Colin Sexton drove with the Hawks down by 3. And Sexton gets to the rim, scores, and seemingly would have been an and 1 to go up by 6. And it was called a push-off on Sexton. And it was the right call, to be 100% clear. It was the right call. It was a foul on him. But if that goes the other way, the Hawks are in trouble. And that didn't go the other way. So it was like little margins along the way here. Fast forward to the end. After the Hawks won that jump ball, the Hornets had to foul with 1 second differential on the shot clock. So they had one to give. They give it, and the Hawks get the ball to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Alexander-Walker was one of their better options in that spot. Obviously, as a reminder, Kennard not playing, Trey not playing, and Nickeil is an 81% free throw shooter over the last 3 seasons. So he's good at the line. Like, if it had been Dyson, obviously you're in some fear there. But Nickeil is one of the guys you wanted to have the ball. Unfortunately, he missed 2 free throws in the last 12 seconds to keep the door open. Now, he did make 2 of them, so it wasn't like total disaster. But they were up by 2 with 11 seconds to go. And I have to say one more thing about the rotation that I hated here. I already mentioned I didn't really understand Vit closing the game. I would have gone with Zach. I think his combination of defense and shooting is better than Vit's was tonight. But what I really thought was like indefensible was Veet played multiple defense-only possessions late in the game. Like, clearly, one possession after a timeout on defense, they had Veet on the court. And that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, with due respect to Quinn and the staff, like, you have Mo Gay, who is a defensive ace. And if you don't want to go with Mo because you're worried about positions or whatever, I disagree. I would play Mo Gay, but at least put Zach in the game. Like, there's no reason to have Veet in the game there. Like, zero. So it didn't bite them, but that was a mistake. And the other headline at the end, I won't go through all of it again. Nickeil had this beautiful strip on Con Kneppel. Now, Con is really good. He had 28 points in this game. He was awesome. But Nickeil got the best of him at the right time. It was called a block. It was, a block/steal, strip, whatever. Awesome play by Nickeil. He had a chance to end the game at the free throw line. Did miss one more, but that was not a problem. They ended up by 3, and they forced an air ball by Bridges at the end. And again, the Hornets didn't score in the last 3 minutes of this game. So the Hawks were already having some issues, but they clamped down when it mattered. They got stops. They beat an undermanned young team, but lots of pivot moments, like the Nickeil strip, Johnson's big-time jumper with 2 minutes to go, the Sexton call, the rebound off of the jump ball where Okongwu chases it down, like little things here and there in a tight game. Swung toward the Hawks, and they got out of there with a win. But man, it was not comfortable in any way, shape, or form. Even if it definitely seemed like it was 7 minutes to go, but that didn't come, and the Hawks had to escape with this win. All right, more to come in a second when it comes to player evaluations after a word from our partners. Basketball is here. Let's be actually being in the arena for these opening games, or really any game throughout the season. Let's be real, though. Buy tickets can be really kind of a headache sometimes. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, and prices jump up right before you're actually ready to check out at the end. It's frustrating sometimes when all you want to do is cheer on your favorite team in person, but that is where the Game Time app comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage of actually buying tickets. It's the ultimate life hack, scoring amazing NBA tickets fast, easy, and stress-free. I've used Game Time a million times in the past and looked seats for friends and myself. It could not have been easier any single time that I've done it. I found great seats in minutes. I love what you see is what you're going to pay at Game Time with no hidden fees at checkout. Plus, you can see exactly what the view's going to look like inside the arena or the stadium, etc. before you actually buy the tickets with their in-app seat feature. And they have the zone deals with their actual game changer as well. If you pick the section, they pick the tickets for you in that section, and you can save big money as a result. You can buy NBA tickets for as little as $25 or less. That's a great deal. You take the guys we're going to buy tickets right now for the NBA with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that place to go is the Game Time app. Create an account and use that code. It's LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Have your health or family needs changed lately? Georgia's got you covered. Georgia Access is our state marketplace for Georgians to compare, apply, and enroll in health insurance plans that offer the best value for their individual needs. Open enrollment is happening now. You can visit georgiaaccess.gov today. That's georgiaaccess.gov. Georgia Access, health insurance for Georgia by Georgia. All right, the individual stuff in this game was certainly, there were some highs and lows, mostly good stuff, but mixed bags as well. So 9 guys played. Asa Newell was the 9th guy by a lot. 4 minutes for Asa. Had 2 fouls and a rebound, played fine, looked fine, but he was sparingly used. And then DNPs for Caleb Houston and Toppin, in addition to the absences of Porzingis, Kennard, Dante, etc. Keaton Wallace returned after a 1-game personal absence yesterday and played well. I thought Keaton was good in this game. 10 points, did have 4 fouls, but had 2 steals, had a block, was +4, had a rebound, hit a couple big threes. I thought Keaton gave the right amount of minutes and also just played well in this game, played good defense, was attentive, and gave them solid minutes behind the Alexander-Walker and Daniels duo in the backcourt. Mo Gay, 4 points, a rebound, a foul, 2 blocks, +2. Defensively, Mo was really good in this game. Offensively, certainly more of a mixed bag. He had one nice floater that I couldn't believe went in, honestly. But kind of a mixed bag. I thought he probably should have played more. That's a theme for Mo recently. But I thought he was fine and definitely useful off the bench, especially in the non-Okongwu minutes. Vee Krejci, 32 minutes for Vee. 1 point on 1 shot. Got the line twice, 1 of 2. 4 assists, 3 rebounds, 3 fouls, and a turnover. I mentioned before, but to be fair to Vee, he was being swarmed by Charlotte's defense. And I think the report is finally out on him that he should be guarded like an elite shooter at this moment because he's been so hot. I will also say it's crazy that he played that many minutes, number one, and also played that many minutes without taking more than 1 shot. So that combination plus his defense, he was overutilized. That was a mistake, in my opinion, according to what Quinn did in this game. But Veit wasn't like bad. Defensively, he had some bad moments, to be sure. But offensively, it was more like, at least he's giving you spacing, and the guys were being kind of flying to him. I thought he was definitely overused, and maybe it was Ricochet carefulness on minutes on the back-to-back. But other than that, he should have played more, I thought, in place of Veit. To the starters. Ricochet was the guy who didn't play as much, obviously. 22 minutes for Zach, 5 points, 3 assists, 2 rebounds, and a block. I thought Zach looked fine. I thought he played well defensively. He was more active early on in the game. Not a huge feature of the offense, but at least was flying around and giving them good minutes. Both times he's been hurt this year. It's taken him some time to get back and get comfortable again. Saw that a little bit in this game as well, but I thought he played fine and probably should have played more. And then the 4 guys who all had big games stat-wise were all, I think, good on the whole. Okongwu, 20 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 fouls, and a turnover, +1 in the game. He actually missed a couple of bunnies that he usually makes, but he was efficient from 2-point range, still 6 of 11. 2-7 from 3 is fine for him. Like, he's going to make more of those than that most of the time. He's still been aggressive in taking them. He was a solid enough defender around the rim. Rebounding-wise was fine. I thought Okongwu played pretty well, and hopefully the injury absence yesterday was a little bit more precautionary than anything else. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, 23 points, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, a steal, a block. Like, Nickeil was 5 of 10 on 2s again, 3 of 7 from 3, like, efficient, good. I have a hard time with Hawks fans that don't just love Nickeil. Like, he's been really, really good. He was really, really useful. A couple big shots in this game, the big strip, the big drive late, like, just huge minutes for them. Dyson Daniels, a season high, 22 points, 9 rebounds to lead the team, 6 assists, 2 steals, +5 in the game. That was the team best. He now has 70 straight games with a steal or better for the Hawks. That's obviously fantastic. He was 9 of 13 on 2s, 1 of 4 from 3. Played very well. Again, some of the defensive stuff, the way he's being guarded is going to maybe be a question long-term. I'm not dismissing that at all, but he did a really good job kind of outweighing it in this game with his floater, with his drive game, with his passing, rebounding, all of the above, and played generally well, I thought. And then Jalen Johnson has been unbelievable. So some history stuff from Jalen tonight. He became the first Hawk since at least 1977, which is when the league started tracking turnovers, to finish a game on the Hawks with at least 25 points, 10 assists, 5 rebounds, and no turnovers. So he ends the game with 28, 11 assists, 8 rebounds, and again, no turnovers in the game. He was 9 of 18 on 2s, 2 of 4 from 3, was just really, really excellent in this one offensively, just bringing the heat, playing like a star, honestly. Also a record for the Hawks franchise. He's now had at least 15, 5-5 in 8 consecutive games. That's the longest streak in the history of the franchise. Obviously, his numbers are crazy good in the non-Trey stretch here. He's been taking on more usage, which is certainly logical for a player of his caliber. But yeah, I mean, he is on track. This is not new, but he's on track to make the All-Star game. He's playing at that level, very, very clearly right now. And I think that is, undeniable. I could go on for a long time about Jalen. I don't have to right now. But in the month of November, I think he's averaging 23, 10, and 8. That's crazy production. He's been really good and was certainly the MVP of this one for Atlanta in 40 minutes. That's all I have on the game itself, but an escape win, but a win nonetheless is the takeaway from this one for me. From here, the Hawks are off on Monday after the back-to-back. They have to travel to Washington to face the Wizards in an NBA Cup game on Tuesday. So because of the schedule this year, there was a long break in the Cup for the Hawks, but they're back with a 2-game Cup stretch here. They play Tuesday and then Friday against Cleveland. Notably, the Hawks are not alive in the group. Toronto won the group already, but they are alive in the wildcard chase in the East. And the Wizards are, let's just say, quite bad. They are 1-15. They've lost 14 games in a row. But as I said on this podcast, as I said on yesterday's podcast, nothing is assured in the NBA. They still have NBA players. It's a road game still. So, yes, it's a favorable matchup on paper for the Hawks, for sure. And from the NBA Cup standpoint, they kind of need to win this game by a decent amount because of the point differential mattering. And then they still have to play Cleveland on Friday, which is a much tougher game. But a winnable game for sure, a chance for a third straight win for the Hawks. And they'll be favored in the game, I'm sure. We'll see how Porzingis looks, and presumably he'll play Kennard TBD. But in the meantime, the Hawks can take solace in a back-to-back sweep which was obviously what you want over the weekend, and now a little bit of a small respite. But then still, they had this stretch of games that I'll mention one more time on this show and probably again later on. The Hawks have not played a game without traveling since November the 8th. And they don't play a game without traveling after the game until December 3rd, 4th, 5th. So they have basically go like 4 weeks without having to travel after every single game. That is hard, but it's the Wizards on Tuesday, and we'll see how that one goes. And then they do have 2 days off between Tuesday's game and Friday's game. But in the meantime, our next show will probably be, at least barring a huge news item, after the game on Tuesday. So please stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to Locked On Hawks anywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on Twitter/X at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow me on Blue Sky at BT Rowland, and follow me on my non-podcast coverage if you want to at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your Sunday into Monday. I'll be back at the very latest after the game on Tuesday evening.